Hi, I'm Tristan Griffin, and I help people who are excelling externally but feeling empty internally. They're winning on the surface, they're doing all the right things, they're working hard, they're disciplined, they're responsible, but on the inside, they're feeling empty. They're feeling some sort of hollowness. They're struggling to feel as if there's any passion or vigor in life, and they're looking for purpose, passion, fulfillment, and freedom. I help those people because I've been one of those people, and I know what it means to transition from a life that is empty to a life that is overflowing with abundant peace, love, joy, fulfillment, passion, purpose, freedom, all of those things. And I'm going to be blunt and upfront with you off the rip. This is a sales presentation to invite people to enter into my coaching to help them navigate the portion of life where they go from empty and hollow to fulfilled and full of purpose and passion. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I can guarantee you're in the right spot. Hang in there for the next 25, 30 minutes. I'll give you all the information you need to make an informed decision on whether or not you're in the right spot to make this transition right now, and I'm the right person to walk alongside you in that transition. So let me back it up for you. At the age of 23, I was suicidal. I was afraid to go into my kitchen for fear of using one of the knives to kill myself. I was afraid to go into my closet for fear of using one of my guns to kill myself. I was an absolute nervous, anxious, miserable train wreck of a human internally, but externally I was exceeding all of the world's standards. At the time, I was in a top 14 law school. I was headed down the path of law, but I hated law. As I got into law school, I hated it. I hated the substance of it. I didn't like the people who really identified with that line of work. I just, boy, was it sucking the life out of me on a daily basis. And on top of that, I had struggled with some challenges as a young kid, a lot of abuse in the home that I grew up in. I had used drinking and drugs and relationships and this sort of performance-based workaholism, this incessant doing all the time to sort of cover up all of those wounds and just push them down as far as I possibly could to try and appear to myself and the world as if I was okay and everything was good and gravy. And I carried all of that with me into high school, where I developed severe anxiety attacks all day, every day, right? My body started speaking to me. These emotions started welling up within me and telling me something was wrong. But what did I do? I just continued to try and bottle it all up. I didn't share it with anyone. I just kept it all in underneath the surface and tried to muscle up and work my way through not only high school, but undergrad and on into law school. And in my second year of law school is where this all came to a head. I received news that my cousin had shot and killed his mom and sister on October 4th of 2012. And whenever I received that, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. It was something that just, from a mental health standpoint, just broke me and just sent me on a downward spiral toward those suicidal thoughts and this really deep, dark place in life. But it made me think about life a lot differently. It made me reconsider the path that I was on. It made me start asking questions like, what is important in life? Is this what I want to do? Is this how I want to spend the next 60, 70 years of my life? Is this the mark that I want to make on the world? Is this my vision for how I want life to go? Excelling externally but miserable internally and just ignoring everything inside of me and just appearing to be something on the surface that I wasn't? Is that what I wanted to do in life? Or did I want to do something different? Did I want to stick my foot in the sand, draw a line in the sand, and say, I've had enough. I'm not going to continue living life this way, even if it means that I have to give up the financial and material security of a life in pursuit of a career in law, and also the social and relational security of being a lawyer. I had to give all of that up in this transition stage because I wanted to pursue a life where I was full internally, where I was winning internally and not just externally. And so for me, that looked like, again, asking a lot of those very difficult questions, beginning to listen to what was going on inside of my body. Instead of pushing down those feelings that were just welling up so powerfully inside of me, I had to listen to them. I couldn't reject them anymore. I had to sit with them. I had to hear what they were saying. I had to allow them to guide me into a better place internally in my life. And as I did that, for me, the transition was out of law into coaching college football. I had had a coach in high school that cared about my integrity as a man. And in my deepest, darkest moments, all I wanted to do was to go provide that for other young men in the world. And so I transitioned out of law into coaching college football. And that was the first leap, the first step in a long line of leaps since then, 14 years ago, that have led me to a life that is overflowing internally. And from my perspective, that's the most important thing for a human being. You can climb a lot of mountains externally, and I climbed a lot of them. And I've seen a lot of people who have climbed a lot of them. And you can feel good for a moment as you get to the top of that mountain. But if you don't climb some of those internal mountains, if you don't start slaying some of those internal dragons, all of those external mountains aren't going to matter. And in fact, those external mountains you'll find eventually are just ways to keep you distracted from the internal mountains that you need to climb. And so as I've taken that journey and climbed those internal mountains inside of myself, I've looked back and said, I see a lot of people in similar situations to me that I would love to help guide through that internal mountain range and help them conquer the dragons that need to be conquered, to set themselves free and to fill themselves up internally, full of purpose, passion, peace, fulfillment, joy, all of those things. And that's what I do now. I help people who are excelling externally but empty internally find purpose, passion, fulfillment, and freedom. And so I'll show you a little bit of my framework and the process that I go through with these people so you can, again, decide whether or not you're in this spot and ready for this transition in your life, and whether or not it makes sense for you to jump in with me and have me guide you into this space. Okay, so this is what I call the 5 stages of psychological liberation, which is just a fancy way of saying the stages that a human goes through as they're journeying from that place of empty internally to fulfilled internally. And the first stage is what I call conditioning. And what you have to know here is that every human being, when we're born, we start out very open. You see it in children all the time. They're super curious. They're trying all sorts of different things. They're just open to the world and everything that comes their way. But over time, we start to pick up social cues from parents, from culture, from society, even from traumatic or harmful events and other authority figures and so on. And slowly but surely, we start to build our worldview and our deep-seated belief system based around those subtle cues that are coming our way. And these beliefs start to shape our identity. And most of these beliefs are never consciously examined by human beings until they're forced to examine them. The second stage is identification. And so eventually people begin to make those, mistake those beliefs for reality. We start to build those beliefs into our personality, and we build a tight little box around ourselves. We don't get outside the bounds of those beliefs. And so statements come into our mind of, I'm not good enough, or life is supposed to be suffering, or I must prove my worth, or my past defines me. These beliefs become a part of the self concept. And again, at this stage, people don't realize they're living inside these beliefs, this tight little box that these beliefs has created for them. They think that this is just the way that life is. Stage 3 is friction, and this is where most people come seeking me. They've started to feel some level of friction in their life. At some point, life creates tension between reality and that belief system that they have built. And this friction comes from emotional suffering, failed relationships, addiction, depression, existential questions, crisis or trauma. All sorts of different avenues can bring this friction into their life. And what this friction feels like a lot of times is just an internal resistance or tension, some sort of low-level emotion that might rise into high-level emotion more consistently as you enter into this friction stage. This stage is often highly uncomfortable, but it's also the beginning of awakening and freedom and fulfillment for that human being. Stage 4 is what I call awakening. This is the moment that someone begins to see this belief system that they've set up, and they see, well, wait a second. This is just a belief system. Maybe this is not reality. Maybe these beliefs aren't true. And you begin to test and question those beliefs. You begin to question your identity and your assumptions and the narrative that you've created about life, right? You start to see that mental prison that you've created for yourself and how it's negatively impacting your life. And this awareness is what allows for transformation. This is where transformation becomes possible. And then stage 5 is what I call liberation or freedom. This is when those false beliefs that have been the tight little prison around your life, this is when they're fully examined and released. And in this moment, something profound happens. People begin living from authenticity. They're no longer a parrot, sort of just mimicking social norms and doing what everybody else does. They live their own individual and authentic life. They have far more clarity regarding their path in life and their purpose, and they had this sense of inner fulfillment and freedom. And they realized that many of the limitations that they believed were real were actually constructed by these beliefs, right? By these subtle messages that came their way early on in life that they believed were rock solid truth, but they weren't. And they find freedom from the oppression of these false beliefs. And so that's the stages that they go through. And again, like I said, I oftentimes have people come to me in stage 3, which is this friction stage. If you're still hanging out in 1 and 2 and you don't really feel the friction, then life hasn't prompted you yet to make this transition into identifying those false beliefs and really dismantling them. But if you're at the stage where you're feeling this friction in your life, you're feeling, again, this internal tension and resistance and emotion welling up within you, then that's a really good indicator that you're beginning to awaken. You're beginning to start to see that false prison that you have built around yourself, and it's time to start dismantling that prison and to walk into greater freedom within your life. And here's the framework that I use to help people walk their way from friction to awakening and on into liberation. What we do is we start to examine the areas of your life. What are your big focuses? And some of the examples can be important relationships, professional life, finances, health, whatever it might be. But what we do is we identify areas where there is friction, right? Where there's that discomfort, that discontent, that disillusionment, that dis-ease, distress, conflict, tension, worry, concern. It's the opposite of smooth and at peace. And the human tendency is to numb, avoid, reject, and fight against this, which just leaves them in a downward repeating cycle of discomfort, discontent, numb and avoid, discomfort, discontent, and it just goes down and down and down as their misery builds more and more and more. But what you've got to do, instead of rejecting and numbing and avoiding this, is you have to inspect and listen to and accept and understand this. And what happens because you're trying to inspect and listen to and accept and understand this discomfort is that it becomes really loud in your life. And a lot of times, because the volume is turned up on this discomfort, people start to go right back to those numbing and avoidance and rejection and fighting against mechanisms. They go right back into fight or flight mode as opposed to staying in this surrendered, curious state regarding that discomfort, which takes them right back into that downward repeating cycle. And so from there, after we've inspected and listened to and accepted and understand, now we take loving action to address that discontent. We have to do something real and practical to break those false beliefs. A lot of times people are using things like affirmations to try and break false beliefs. And affirmations can be a great first step and reminder. But why affirmations don't truly change people's actions is because they haven't taken a radical enough action to really show themselves a different reality and really break that false belief. So we have to take loving action to address this discontent. But again, when we do that, when we endeavor to take that action, there's going to be a lot of false beliefs and fear that flood our mind and keep us, or try to keep us, from taking that action. And again, oftentimes because the discomfort level is so high, people return to the numbing and avoidance and rejection and fighting, and they get back into that downward cycle. But if we can take that action, we then break the chains of the fear and those false narratives in your head, those false beliefs in your head, and you experience a new reality with greater freedom and less discomfort. And that's the process. You just continue down that road, identifying these spaces and areas in your life. And the reason it's important to have a guide on this path is because it's an incredibly challenging path for multiple reasons. Number one, when you start to follow this path, you start to interact with the world in a way that's radically different than the way that most people are interacting with the world. You start sort of swimming in the opposite direction of humanity, and that in and of itself feels lonely and uncomfortable. On top of that, of course, as I talk about all of this discomfort and sort of taking this discomfort head on, again, it can be overwhelming at times. You can be confused at times and really think, where do I go? What do I do? What's the next right step? It helps to have another human who's been there, done that, to talk with and work it through with, so that you can really stay clear on what is the next right step. How do I break this false belief and enter into that new reality of fulfillment and freedom? If you don't have a quality community in this space, it's really difficult to continue down this path consistently over a long period of time, because you will at many times feel misunderstood and lonely. So to have somebody who's been there, done that, who can help you be gentle with yourself and gentle with others, who can help you stay committed to the path and committed to really honoring and loving yourself and providing yourself with this incredible level of fulfillment and freedom that you're so longing for. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. And so what it looks like practically to get involved with me is super simple. I only have two options. Number one is a 3-month option. Number two is a 12-month option. Both include a once a week, 1-hour meeting where you and I jump into that framework and start to inspect some of those areas in your life and untie some of those internal knots that are keeping you from purpose, passion, fulfillment, and freedom. And then we'll alternate weeks between doing that and jump into some educational materials that will help you start to see the world differently and replace those old false beliefs with new quality beliefs as you move forward. The cost to both is $1,000 a month. If you go with the 3-month option, you can pay $2,500 up front to cover all 3 months. If you go with the 12-month option, you can pay $10,000 up front to cover all 12 months. And it's that simple. As you can tell from this presentation, I'm not a person of a lot of fluff and flash. I don't believe in it. I don't like it. I don't like how it distracts humans and pushes them onto the wrong path. What you see is what you get with me, and that's a product of everything that we've just talked about. So again, let me recap here. If you're a person who right now in your life, you're saying, you know what, everything's going fairly well externally, or maybe things are starting to fall apart externally because of this internal emptiness that you're feeling, because you're just struggling to find any sort of passion and vigor and enthusiasm for life. Everything's starting to bother you. You've got these emotions that are starting to well up in your life, and you're starting to think, what the heck is going on with me? I want to tell you, number one, you're in a really good spot. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but we can take you from that place to internally fulfilled and free if you'll just engage with this process. And I want to encourage you to engage with the process. This is a really important step in the life of a human being that not only provides incredible fulfillment and freedom for that human being, but also has ripple effects that impact all of their relationships and interactions in this world. And as you step into this freedom, you start to help others step into their own freedom as they travel this journey. You start to set other people free, right? You break out of that prison, they see you broken out of the prison, and they say, I want that for myself as well. And so you help them not only just by the way you live your life, but then you can turn around and help them practically as well. It's a really incredible thing in your life. I can't underestimate how important this is. But again, if you're not there, you're not there. If you're in that friction point and you need somebody to help you establish a firm foundation so that you can move forward into greater fulfillment and freedom, don't hesitate to reach out. The website is www.tristan, that's Tristan, Griffin, griffin.com/book, BOOK. We'll do a free strategy call. We'll jump into the details of your life. I'll help you discern whether or not you're really in the place where it's time to move on this, and you can get to know me more to make sure that you feel comfortable in moving forward with me in this space. Otherwise, I hope I've provided you with some quality information. Again, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service.